I'm a freelance TV writer. I have this matchmaking thing on the side, but it's a small business. But I would feel the need to explain why I was doing multiple things. And now it's something I'm so proud of. And it's so important to me that it's like I do write, I do matchmake, and it's cool. Like I get excited to share both of my passions, but I think it's only because I've now reached a point in my life where I feel good about both.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy and life with yours truly, Michael Kahan. Howdy, howdy, howdy. When I think of Jaydi and this chat, the words hustle, determination, and love of her craft spring to mind. Jaydi has an incredible journey. Hearing how Jaydi became a matchmaker is incredibly fascinating. Plus, her method and approach, love and passion, is contagious. I also geek out about her time on Family Guy and what she's learnt there. It's an amazing ride filled with so many gems. There are plenty of lessons and takeaways in this conversation. I loved it. Okay, cool. Let's get into it. Jaydi Samuels Kuba got her start in television writing with credits on shows from Family Guy to Salem. After watching her colleagues in film and TV struggle to find meaningful relationships, she started LJMatchmaking, her couple curation service for people in the industry. Today, she and her business partner are known as the love agents of Hollywood. She's a certified date and relationship coach. She's set up many couples since, finding her own match in the process. She also co-hosts the podcast Match Made in Heaven with her husband. Her book, Your Last First Date, Secrets from a Hollywood Matchmaker, will be out January the 27th, America time, and it's a great read. I love the book. It's filled with so many amazing stories, reflections, and advice. So check it out. It's also in the episode notes. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, and we chat about officiating weddings, screenwriting, being Seth MacFarlane's assistant, writing episode 250 for Family Guy, her love and passion of matchmaking and being a dating coach, and her new book, Your Last First Date. Before we get into this chat, I would love it if you would share the podcast around, like, comment, subscribe, as it allows me to lock in amazing guests like this one, and it really helps me grow the podcast. Okay, cool. Thanks so much. Let's get into it. Oh, this could be a good place to start, actually. I saw that you recently officiated a wedding. I'd love to know.
Wow, you do your research.
I'd love to know. Yes, we do. I'd love to know about it and how that felt.
Yeah, for sure. I officiated two recently, so I'm actually not sure which one you're
Oh,
referring
cool.
to.
Yeah.
They
Either.
were, yeah. So, well, the first one I did was very intimate. It was a very small one on a beach, and I mean, it's a long story, but her father has dementia. Her mother recently passed away, so we wanted to keep it small, just for him in particular. I'm starting this off so humorously.
I know, there's no pressure.
um, it felt no, it felt great. It was just very special to be asked to do something like that. The That was the first wedding I performed, but the second one this year. I mean, the first second one that I was asked to do. So for me, the more comical of the two was when I was initially asked about the first time by somebody that was close to me to officiate a wedding, and I thought she was asking for my husband to officiate. He's, he's extremely charismatic, and he officiated a wedding recently, or prior to her asking, and she literally took me out to lunch to ask if I would officiate the wedding. But the way she teed it up was she was very nervous. I don't know why. And started saying all these attributes that she was looking for in officiant. And I thought she wanted my permission for Dave to officiate. Yeah. So I was all geared up to be like, oh my God, of course, he'll do a great job for you. And then when she said, can you do it? I was quite shocked, but really excited and really touched. And then like literally a week later, somebody else asked me to officiate. So I don't know, something was in the air.
Wow. How funny is that? That's like a Curb Your Enthusiasm moment where the miscommunication. That's so. Was this a client or a friend of yours, or
So
just
yeah, kind both, I guess.
yeah?
But dear friends of mine who I have set up in the past, and so the first one, the way she met her husband, is actually quite an incredible story. I don't know how much time we have,
No,
but
I love these stories.
yeah, it's a great one, and it's actually in my book that I mentioned in terms of people being creative about ways that they find their significant others. So her name is Jackie, and she was going to my friend Florencia got burnt out from the online dating apps, as one does,
Yep.
and she had said to her friend, "I'll help you find a husband. I know you're over the dating apps. Let me run your profile for you." And she just would once in a while set up a date for her friend. And she would show a photo ahead of time. My friend would okay it. She'd go up on the date. Well, Jackie saw a guy, Sergio, on the app, sent Sergio over to my friend, said, "Are you cool with me setting you up with this Italian manufacturing engineer?" And she's like, I don't know. I think I'm going to pass on this one. And my friend was like, "Well, could I go?" And she went on the date. She hit up Sergio. She said, "I know this is unorthodox. This is not actually Florencia speaking, on Floor's profile. Um, my name is Jackie, and I've been finding dates for Floor, but I kind of like you for myself." And now they're married, and I got to officiate. So that was
Wow.
great.
That is a good day in the office, right?
Yeah.
And is it even more special because, we'll get into like your coaching style and how you go about it, but just seeing like it's one thing to get two people to connect and go on a few good dates and then maybe it's not, it just ends there and that's fine. But seeing someone with, the ultimate goal of marriage, do you just like, can you explain that to me, that feeling when you see someone you've set up happy at the altar? How does that feel?
For sure. I mean, this was not the example because she basically found him on her own.
Yep.
But in terms of the success stories I have had,
Yep.
um, it is it is the most special feeling. I mean, it's the whole reason I went into that line of work, right?
Yeah.
The byproduct in my own life was I got to marry one of my clients, and that's a whole other thing. But in terms of seeing other people happy with people I introduced them to, it's wild. On an intellectual level, when you start doing that, um, you think you know what it's going to feel like, and it's quite another when you see the couple together. Because I meet people individually,
Yep.
and when you pair them together, they run off into the sunset, and you don't always get to see the product of the introductions you're making.
Yep.
So when I have the benefit of getting to see the resulting couple, of said introduction, it's such a special thing. And then, we've been in business now for 15 years. Some of
Oh,
them have had
nice.
babies, and it's incredible to know like there's life in the world has not just come out of my body, but I've introduced two people and it's come out of theirs. It's a pretty cool feeling.
I would imagine it's one of the best feelings, and I've got a few quotes of yours which are really nice. I want to tie up the you being an offic. What do you call it? An officiate at
Inefficient. What
yeah.
do you call it?
Well, what's the difference between that and a celebrant? Is the celebrant the one that actually can legally marry them, or is it
I
the
actually don't even know the word. Say that word again.
a celebrant?
A celebrant. I don't think we have that here.
Ah, so maybe someone in Australia or someone around the world is going, Michael, you're the biggest idiot. I don't know.
Or they're saying you're the worst dating expert because you don't know what a celebrant is, but I
No,
have
it's probably a
I've
different.
never heard that.
I need to, yeah. Normally like we've had all the rabbis, and then we've seen a few celebrants recently that have been really good. Do you have to do a course or anything to do that, or you get up?
I got certified online, which took all of 30 seconds.
Did you just click yes? Yeah.
Basically, it's I did it through the Universal Life Church.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, like at least in the States here, it doesn't have to be a religious ceremony for it to be legal. And it doesn't even really have to be, it doesn't have to have the traditional components of a ceremony to be legal, as long as there's a witness that says you got married. And you are able to get a document, from the courthouse saying that you are married, and you have whoever presided over that ceremony sign it, then it's considered official. So even if I hadn't gotten certified, that was just sort of a fun thing to do. it still would have been legal. You don't even have to have any sort of official title because there's, separation of church and state. So there doesn't have to be any celebrant, to oversee. Two
Nice.
people could just want to get married, and there needs to be somebody there to say, yes, in fact, it happened. But that person could have any background.
I think it is the same thing now that you've
Yeah,
spoken a bit about
probably.
it. That's very cool. And what are the nerves like? Do you remember the first time? Because it's different to what your job normally. It's I would assume mostly one-on-one base. I know you work with Lauren and you've done a lot of other stuff. But what are the nerves like when you get up and you present yourself and do the ceremony or whatever it
For
is?
officiating,
Yeah.
it's nerve wracking. I try to stay focused on the couple, and just seeing the impact that my words are having on the couple. With because of my writing background, I definitely try to get everybody to laugh, a few times and make sure I'm keeping the energy light and that people are engaged. So. I might have some material prepared, and if I feel like it's not going over with the crowd, then I definitely I'm very conversational in my delivery. And
Nice.
so I will make changes. I'm not one to stick to a script if I feel like it's not working. However, for me, at the end of the day, it's really just making sure I'm creating a special moment for the two most important people involved that day.
That's a very good answer. And I guess we'll give a bit of a backstory to how you got there. And I know that you used to be a writer. When you were at college, I think you wrote like docos and everything was kind of, within the lines of like romantic, or it had a romantic essence. Did you ever think that you would be doing this while you were, pursuing the writing and all of that?
Yeah. Well, by the way, I do take issue with used to be a writer. I have a book coming out at the end of January, so I'm still a writer.
Thank you. You are correct. The author screenwriting lens, I've always differentiated it. And the book is in the episode notes, and we're going to talk about it in detail, but people can check it out. You know what I mean? The screenwriting to
No,
the
it's true. But what's funny is like the old me, I was so worried that I would only be perceived as a matchmaker and as a dating coach. And I used to, when people asked what I did, I would get very self-conscious about the fact that I wasn't only a writer. Because, theoretically, I think it's changing these days who doesn't have a side hustle, but I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there that, oh, if you are doing something else, you must be failing right at the other thing that you're doing. Otherwise, why aren't you putting 100% of your effort into that? And I used to really, when people would ask what I do, there was a lot of not mumbling, but like sort of just like, not, I would never confidently say, I do this and I do this. Like I was at the car dealership earlier today, and when you're buying a new car, they ask, what do you do for work? I'm a writer, and I'm a matchmaker.
yeah.
But back then I would have been like, well, I'm a freelance TV writer. I have this matchmaking thing on the side, but it's a small business. But I would feel the need to explain why I was doing multiple things. And now it's something I'm so proud of.
Cool.
And it's so important to me that it's like I do write, I do match make, and it's cool. Like I get excited to share both of my passions, but I think it's only because I've now reached a point in my life where I feel good about both.
Yep.
And so that's helped. I wish I had been able to do that prior.
So many people resonate. I've so many examples spring to mind for me as well. What do you think that really is? It's a societal thing where you can only do the one thing, which I've always found counterintuitive. Like I know one of my friends, he does DJing and lighting and sound, and yes, it's kind of within like the same bracket, but they're all very different jobs. And people are like, well, if he's doing six different things, he can't be doing two. I'm like, no, he just loves doing it all. It's just obviously might be hard
Exactly.
to like balance time. Where do you think that comes from? Because I don't think, you can have your hobbies, your jobs. I think it's really important to do the things that inspire you as much as you possibly can. Was that a journey in terms of with that confidence? Where did that come from? Was it with time? Was it realizing that you'd been succeeding in both fields and you felt comfortable to be able to just say, I am these things? Was there a moment or just more time?
Yeah, no, these are great questions. It was gradual. I think that everything really clicked in some ways when I became a mom. But I think
Yes.
just the recognition that wow, like waking up one day and realizing my definition of success has changed. And that just unlocked my entire life, really. Like, this is the most balance I've ever had, the most I've ever felt at peace. And I
Cool.
think a lot of it just comes from the fact that, like I said, I had one definition of success when I was younger. And if I didn't constantly keep that bar where it was, it felt like I was not achieving it
Yeah.
and therefore failing at, and that would cause a whole range of emotions. And then realizing that success isn't necessarily, getting married, or having a hit TV show or whatever it is that people set as their bar of, I need to achieve XYZ in order to feel successful and to believe that others will perceive me as successful. It shifted when I realized success is feeling happy. Like, truly, whatever it takes to feel happy. For some people, maybe they're not happy unless they have a hit TV show, but that wasn't the case for me. Part of that shift occurred as well, backtracking a little, when I went on a podcast with my business partner,
Yeah.
and they had asked the question, um,
Shoot, bang, marry.
yeah, yeah. What do they say in Australia?
Shoot, bang, marry. What do they say?
Shoot, bang, marry. It's a
Yeah.
lot more explicit here. It's fuck, marry, or
Yeah,
kill.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, they were like, I had been asked that on a podcast with my business partner. It was a dating podcast, and they had asked us, and I think the three at the time, it was the entertainment industry, the dating industry, and it was Jason Momoa, because he was my business partner's hall pass. It came up in the conversation earlier in the episode. So those were the three choices. My business partner, she had said that she would kill the matchmaking industry, which I was gutted. I was like, what are we doing? Like, this is the person that I'm setting, but she had a funny explanation for it. And it's like, I don't want it to have to exist. I want people to find love on their own. But the truth is, her real passion, and she wasn't getting rid of Jason Momoa, let's be honest. Her real passion is entertainment, and she loves the matchmaking company we have together, but it's not her. I don't say it's not her passion. She's very passionate about it too. But when push came to shove, when she had to take that gun out, she was ready to go to bat for the entertainment industry. And I had a completely different response. And up until then, if you had asked me in a different way, um, what do I ultimately want to do, or what have you, I probably would have said something flashy in the world of entertainment. But when presented with, like, okay, got to get rid of one, I could not let go of the idea. Jason Momoa, he was a goner from the start, but I couldn't get rid of that. Not get rid of the idea of, like, if I had to get rid of one, it would be the entertainment industry. And so that recognition, I forget what year it was quite some time now, but it just clicked. And then I think it was a gradual process from that moment up until becoming a mom, and priority shifting, and just realizing that what it took for me to be happy was not even remotely tied to what projects I was working on or selling.
Wow, that is a huge journey. Not many people get to have that clarity. And also that it proves the points that podcasts save the world with insights and clarity. I actually remember listening to that podcast and then seeing it in the book. I'm like, oh, that is so cool. How one
Are you
question can,
serious?
yeah,
That's very cool.
yeah, that's like quite a profound moment. I think because you've gone through such a wonderful journey, let's dive deep into the writing side. I don't know how early in your career, but you become the assistant for Seth MacFarlane. Was that like one of the first jobs in? How did you get a job like that?
Yeah. So when I first graduated, so I went to USC for screenwriting. At the time, people faxed a lot.
Oh, yeah.
No one uses a fax machine now. Sorry to anyone out there who's still using fax machine, but I do not use a fax machine now, nor do my friends. And so at the time I was graduating, I didn't know anyone who worked in TV. I had done internships; they were all in film, and at the time they were even more separated, those
Oh,
worlds,
like
than
the
they are
TV and
today.
film. Yeah, the split.
Yeah, like if you intern for a production company, they only did television, or they only did features. And so at the time, I thought I wanted to work on movies and write movies. And It wasn't until I was just about to graduate that I took my first course in writing TV. And now, again, it's totally different. I think the majority of courses at the film school, I think, have to do
Oh,
with
wow.
television.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was like a late realization. Granted, I was still in my early 20s, but when I was graduating, I had this whole plan of how I was going to go work for a production company and I was going to go make connections and, maybe even work in an agency, but with the goal of writing film. And then because I wanted to write TV, I did not know a soul who worked in television. And so I had to get creative. So I looked up on IMDb. At the time, there were 96 shows, both comedy and drama. I was open to either in production. Um, it's funny because now, in some ways, there's significantly less. But if you had asked me like 2 years ago, I would have said there were significantly more. But at the time, it was 96. So this was like 2008. Yeah, 2008, 96 shows. I got the production companies who worked on all of them. I got their fax numbers and I went to Kinko's and I literally just faxed my resume, didn't hear back. So that was discouraging. Okay, I'm still writing for TV. How do I do this? I looked again on IMDb. I looked up all of the different cast and crew members, and then I found them on Facebook. There wasn't other forms of social media back
Of
then.
course, yeah.
And I messaged as many as I could. Mostly didn't hear back. Some I have in my archives now, some really funny replies from some pretty cool people.
Oh, that's nice.
But I got two offers to come in and interview from that. And one was a bit more prestigious. It was to be a showrunner's assistant on the show According to Jim,
Yep.
but it was in its last season. So there was a fear like, okay, I'll go there for a year and then I don't know what's going to come of me. And then there was being a PA, a production assistant on Family Guy. And obviously, I still had to get the offers and all of that. But I went into interview. I ended up getting offers on both. And I took the PA job, A, because of the fact that it wasn't going to get canceled probably for a third time anytime soon. And then the other, I just thought guys would want to date me more if I worked on Family Guy.
Is this, yeah, just
So
the edgy humor or yeah.
yeah, it just seemed like a cooler show to say you worked on. And I was young and I felt like, if I'm going to grow anywhere, like I might as well try to make connections at a place that's also going to give me an assist in my dating life. And so I chose Family Guy and was stocking fridges and fixing copy machines. And, you get to know everyone on the show and it's truly like a family over there. But in terms of the totem pole, I was at the very, very bottom. And at some point, it became very clear to me the steps you needed to take, and every show is different. But on Family Guy, like who typically gets to write on the show, and what jobs they have before they're approached, and all of that. And so I did my homework. I realized I kind of had two paths, and it was either be a writer's assistant on the show, or work for Seth directly as his assistant, and then usually as long as you have the talent to back it up, at some point you might get the opportunity to write a freelance episode and then get brought onto staff if that episode does well. And so I decided to pursue the working for Seth option. Writer's assistants, I do type extremely quickly, but you have to type, like 90 something. What's I don't even remember the metric for it's been so long. You have to type really fast. So you have to do that. The lifestyle is kind of not great. You're working till all hours of the night, and you have to learn basically a new language in terms of because there's no script coordinator or not in the same way. There's no set because it's animated. So you're doing a lot more work than a traditional writer's assistant or sort of combined. So anyway, there's a lot more to it, and I just felt like you know what? Like I'll get to know the guy directly. That seemed like the best way. And also he's across other things too. He didn't just create Family Guy. At the time there was American Dad, there was the Cleveland Show, he had albums, he was getting into movies. So it just felt like I would have more exposure if I were lucky enough, right? I would have been jumping at it. Like if someone had approached me for the other, I would have been happy to do that. But I decided I was going to put my mental energy into trying to work for him directly. A lot of politics there, the same way there is for any other show. But I ended up writing him a letter. And I should say, after production assistant, I became the script coordinator on the show. Or I'm sorry, not script coordinator, production coordinator. And then, which you basically the glorified PA. You're overseeing all the other PAs.
Yep.
When I was the production coordinator, I wrote him a letter. I don't think he knew who I was. He knew maybe there was a PA person who played table tennis in the office sometimes or
Oh yeah,
whatever
because
that
you were like a pro, weren't you? You were at a
I did play in college.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I kind of had that reputation around the office, just like kicking people's butt, wearing high heels. But beyond that, I was like, I don't even know if this guy knows my name. But I wrote him a letter. It completely just delineated why I was going to be the best assistant he's ever had and why he should interview me. Because at the time, they didn't interview for his assistant. There was a producer over there who essentially, he's so busy. Like, not to say, like, I think it's wonderful when people sit down and get to interview their own assistants, but there's a very justifiable reason why he didn't used to do that. He would outsource it. A producer on the show would just hire his assistant. That would be that. I had heard a rumor that someone else was getting essentially plucked for the job. I was livid. I had turned down other opportunities like to be a showrunner's assistant or to at least interview for it and different things because I thought, well, if I take this one job and then the other one opens, I won't get to interview because I'll have just committed to this other thing. So I'd been turning things down. And then I found out I wasn't even going to get interviewed. It was going to go to this guy. And I was pissed. And so I decided, okay, I've been resourceful before. I could be resourceful again. I literally wrote him a letter and I waited until he was alone one day by the water cooler in the kitchen.
Like, hey,
And
what
I
are
was
you
like,
doing?
I don't know if you know me, but I'm your production coordinator. I forget what I said, but I think I would really kill it as your assistant. I explained why in this letter and I like handed it to him and was like, yeah, I ran away.
Oh, that would be very nerve-wracking, yeah.
And all of a sudden, for the first time in like the history of the show, I heard he was interviewing himself for candidates.
Yep.
And I was one of the people who was getting an interview. And so already I was like, okay, this is a good sign. He never interviews. I wrote him this letter. And sure enough, and I still till this day, like I think I was the best suited person for the open position. But I did end up getting the position. And so it's a very long explanation to
No, that's
how did that get started.
Yeah. I've got so many questions on that. I love that. Like you
Yeah.
knew what you wanted. You did it in a very respectful way. You didn't like say that guy was like a serial killer, plant drugs in his locker, you know, sabotage him. You put out a letter, you put yourself out there and
All very tempting options.
oh, I heard about this guy. He's not a good guy. And then you put yourself out there and you get the opportunity to be interviewed. You still then need to do the work to get it. And then it changed also his mindset. He's like, oh, maybe I should probably interview people. That's an amazing story. And then how does your life change? Because I assume you work hands-on with him, but you're probably also doing other stuff as well. Did that teach you a lot about the industry and what you needed to do to succeed as a writer and in the industry?
Everything. I mean, not to disparage USC Film School, because I honestly I had an incredible education there and I'm so grateful for it. I got 2 degrees in Seth MacFarlane.
Oh,
And
nice.
had I not gone to film school, I would have been just fine. I felt like, I had learned everything that I needed, at least if I wanted to work in animation specifically,
Yep.
by essentially shadowing him. I say 8 years for 2 degrees, but I was his assistant for roughly 5. I was his second assistant, and I was his first assistant. At one time, there were 4
What's the
assistants.
difference? Jesus, what a busy man. My goodness. Do you
Oh
each get
yeah, no, it's
different roles,
unbelievable.
all for different
Yeah,
parts of?
so sure. He had, and I believe still has a personal assistant. Anything that's outside of a work request traditionally would get fielded by his personal assistant. So he has dry cleaning or what have you. Um, she's incredible and does a lot more than that. But like
No, I get
things
what you
that
mean,
have
like
to do with the
outsource.
house, like
Yeah.
kind of a house manager type position. Then there's the second assistant, which is what I was initially, and that is essentially a glorified PA, except you're a PA for one person. So anything that comes up that requires leaving the desk, because the phone is ringing off the hook all day, and people are coming who to knock on his door that you have to be like, sorry, not right now, all day. And so someone needs to be there. And
Yeah.
so that second assistant was like, okay, like this came up. You need to go out get this for him. Maybe it's a work gift, like the holidays are coming up and he wants to get a gift for people on the show or whatever. Like the second assistant would do that because it would require leaving the office. So I did that for a little while. And then while you're doing that, it's basically a job where you're training to be the first. Um, Traditionally, and again, this is why I was interested in doing it mainly, a lot of his first assistants went on to write for the show. So
Ah,
it was kind of this unspoken thing that you're training to take over to be the primary assistant.
yep.
And then that fourth assistant, when he had at one point, came about because he started working on movies and that was on the opposite coast and he needed a driver at one point. Like there was just a lot of different things and there ended up being the need for an additional person. I don't know how many he has right now, but I can promise you all of us were working crazy full time. So
Well, it just
it was
shows how
definitely needed.
it just
Yeah.
shows how busy. I won't make this all about him, but I find this really fascinating into the start. And I've also, and I'll go to another point in a sec, but I always look to him as like a great model for success in that previously no one knew what he looked like when he was on the animation shows. So he's running, as you said, those two animation shows, and then Cleveland comes involved. He's probably the showrunner. He voice acts in them. He writes, and then he transitions. Also, is still doing that, and he has movies. He's written his own movie, stars in the movies. Not necessarily that I would want to act, but I always thought, wow, that guy is doing so much. He's a great singer. Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, when did you were you involved in the writers' room if he was there? Like, would you go with him and sit in those meetings and stuff as the assistant? What was like the involvement level there at the earlier stage?
Sure. So his involvement in the show really changed over the years.
Mm.
So prior to my being there, he was in the writer's room every day.
Yep.
That wasn't the case toward the end, just because he was pulled in so many different directions. I would never join him in the writer's room.
Yep.
The only time as an assistant that I had experience in a writer's room was on Family Guy, and this is getting a little into the weeds, but I think maybe interesting to one or two people.
Oh, very me.
He was,
I especially I do screenwriting, so I want to get all my
yeah.
scripts out there and learn. So yeah, you can. Yeah.
So yeah, so Family Guy, as you know, there's cutaways on the show that sometimes like Peter might say, "Oh, that's just like that time that I," and then it'll cut completely out of the scene to a new location, and there'll be some sort of joke involved with the metaphor that he's throwing out there. So there are writers, there's the big writers room that breaks the story. At the time I was on the show, I think there were like 26 writers, which is highly unusual. Usually
Yeah.
there's 7. So every year the budget would grow, they'd use it on the writing staff. Um, all great for the writing community, so no complaints here. But it was a huge writers room, and what they would do to take advantage of that is there would be one main room where the stories would all get broken. They would um, come up with alternate jokes for existing episodes. And that sort of the showrunner would always be in there kind of overseeing. Then we had what's called gag rooms, and there would literally be separate rooms. Usually there was at least 2 at a time, sometimes 3 on a busy day, where those cutaways that I'm referring to, people like maybe 3 or 4 writers would get pulled from that main room, go to the gag room, and they would just pitch jokes for that one cutaway. And it would be
Wow.
like an all day affair. And when they were done, you would come back into the main room and you would pitch it to the whole room. And whatever one got the most laughs, that would be the joke in the show. So literally, like a whole half day would be spent
Just
on
for a
one
joke.
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so they really, it's wonderful like how much perfectionism is there. And so what would happen is there would be the need for assistants to get pulled into those rooms sometimes because there'd only be the Family Guy at the time had 2 writers assistants on the show. So if there's one in the main room and one in a gag room, well, if there's a second gag room that opens or a third, there would need to be someone in there like furiously typing notes and not missing anything that people were saying. And so, and also, that's a whole art knowing what you do right because you're not a stenographer, right? If you're a writer's assistant and people are, saying things that are never going to make it into an episode, being able to discern what are they going to appreciate is in the notes and what are they going to say like this is bogging it down and I can't figure out what we actually said. So assistants would get pulled in, and it would make my day on the days where I would be one of the assistants that would get pulled into a gag room.
Yep.
Such a great learning experience. You get to hear how all the jokes are pitched and what people are laughing at, what's working, what's not. As for shadowing Seth, he was very generous about allowing me to accompany him on, let's say, like a scoring session. There's times where I had sat in on scoring sessions because it's one of the few television shows where actually they will score it live. Then there is, where they use like a full orchestra and all of that.
Yeah,
He would go into like the even like with actors or what have you. Like I was able to see actors record the voices, sit in on table reads. I mean, a lot of people in the office got that perk, which is great. But he would, even with editing, being able to peek in and see what was going on. And it was just such a great education in that way because he is such a meticulous individual, and it's a huge part of why he's so successful. But he would look at the storyboards even and go through and make notes on changes in the storyboards. And so being able to be the person receiving those storyboards and delivering them to the director or what have you, getting to see those notes and the changes he would make and learning from that was just so invaluable.
That's so awesome. Sorry, last one on that, just while this springs to mind. Did
Yeah,
he
no,
have awareness of what your aspirations were? Is that why he, helped you along the way? How does that happen? Or he's like, if you want to, it's there. How do those conversations
yeah.
happen?
He definitely, like in the back of his mind, knew that I wanted to write. Did he know that I specifically would be so jazzed to write on his show? I don't know that he had the bandwidth to think about it,
Based on what you
Um,
said, it probably kind of think about what he's going to have for lunch.
yeah, but no, he had been really helpful toward the end. I waited until I really felt like, okay, I've earned my stripes. Now is the time to start inquiring. And he was really, really supportive and helpful once that happened. And so I still, like, I'll never forget the phone call he was on the Million Ways to Die in the West set in New Mexico. And finding out I was going to get to write a freelance episode, that was unbelievable. And there were other times, like I remember Scott Stuber, the producer, was making the show Whitney, and I was on the set of Ted. And so this was prior to that. I hadn't even written an episode yet, but he heard Stuber was staffing Whitney, and he was like, I think Jaydi would be great for that. It was the first time I ever got to officially, I didn't get it, but officially submit for staffing on a show. And he had just like on his own mentioned. And so he definitely knew I had aspirations to
Yep.
write. I am a lot funnier on paper than I am in person. And so I don't know, interacting with me and seeing me in a work context, if he's like, oh yeah, Jaydi, Family Guy writer,
Yep.
And so when I did actually vocalize it to him, he was extremely supportive. And, at that point, the showrunners had read my material and felt like I was capable of the task and all of that. But yeah, he had been championing me as a writer even prior.
That's brilliant. And while you were there, were you writing in the background? Were you trying to, like, I know you mentioned just the showrunners. Had you written much, or was it more, give me the opportunity and I'll write something for you?
No, I had learned enough in school that you don't ask or you don't wait until your hand. First of all, no one hands you an opportunity. You have to ask for it. At least in TV, there's just too many people that want it badly. But yet you don't approach anyone and ask for help until you have proof to back it up that you can deliver. And so, yeah, I had plenty of material. I was always working on new material. At that point, I had been hip pocketed at WME. Do you know what that is? Basically, when you're not an actual client of an agency, but they will look out for you. So like if they help get you a job, of course they'll take the commission,
Ah, yeah.
but they're not going to focus their energy on you. You're not going to be listed as an official client for them. They call it hip pocketing.
Yep.
And so at the time I was hip pocketed at WME. I
Oh,
had, even before the Family Guy episode, I had gotten a pilot that I had written set up with Warner Brothers. So people were aware. And actually, it was Rich Appel, who's one of the current showrunners of Family Guy, is the one who passed my script along to someone at WME saying, I think this could get made. I think this is good. And so there were other people looking out for me too, which was really
That's awesome. And then, so how did you get episode? That's actually so cool of seeing your journey with hustle, putting yourself out there. Also, you're working probably crazy hours, and then also to have the energy to write as well and to want to improve. A lot of people probably, if they had a job like that, they might be like, well, I'm already in it, like I'll wait or something. But you was like hustle, putting in effort. I love that. How did you end up getting the 250th episode? Was it just the episode you're referring to before, and that happened to be episode 250? Can you tell me a bit more on that?
A lot was sheer luck. And a lot was hopefully I did a good job on the episode, but I would say mostly luck. So it's originally it was the same premise that I was able to write. The way I guess to explain a little bit in terms of how writers are selected for episodes at the beginning of every season, and it might have changed, but when I was there at the beginning of every season, everyone would go up to Seth's house, and the writers would go up to Seth's house, and they would pitch every premise they had for the season. And they would decide from that powwow, it would be like an all day, all weekend affair type thing. Um, they would choose the episodes for that season. And so a lot of times writers would get to write their own ideas, but also you want to be fair, because sometimes there's script fees involved and such, or residuals, right? If you're the writer of an episode. So they like to be a little bit fair and equitable in terms of the distribution of, maybe Chris Sheridan came up with half the ideas. I'm just throwing out a name. Came up with half the ideas for that season. He's not going to write half the ideas. They're going to get divided equally, and everyone's going to sort of get a crack at some. And so even if you don't come up with the idea, so as a freelance writer that season, I was not part of that original brainstorming. So I had to be lucky enough that someone had a great idea for an episode and they decided that was going to be one of the freelances. So that was the first piece of luck. And then casting, I think, had a little bit to do with the positioning of what episode it became as well. So originally, we actually wrote the entire script about Bruce Willis. Um, and then that had to get changed because I believe, and I don't want to be misquoted because it's been ages, from memory, like I have a memory of him declining. He didn't want to play himself, which happens a lot.
Yeah.
With these actors, they want to show off their range and they don't really want to. So a lot of them don't like playing themselves. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had declined and we had to pitch on alternates without the episode changing
Oh, that'd be
drastically.
so
And
hard.
so, but yeah, and Bruce Willis is amazing, and I would have been so thrilled to have had him. But as it turned out, we ended up the episode centered around Liam Neeson, so all the jokes and everything had to be Liam Neeson centric. And so I got the privilege of writing for Liam Neeson, and so I think a lot of it had to do just I can't remember like what he had coming out at the time, or I feel like it was like not that when was Taken, I don't know. He was kind of like a hot actor at the time. Like everyone wanted. So I think that had a little bit to do with it as well. And then obviously it had to turn out to be a good episode, or that wouldn't that wouldn't have been great. But everyone's episodes turn out well, so I can't say, oh, my episode was just so well written, that's why they made it a monumental one. It was truly a lot of luck involved.
You're very humble, but also just to get a script made, given you've said all the writers and the process and everything involved, it's not the easiest task in the world to get a show up, an episode up, and then yeah, so well done. What Springside also with Liam Nielsen. I don't know if you ever saw it. I think it's the funniest scene in all of television. I've watched every comedy you can imagine on Life's Too Short, and he tries to do improvisational comedy.
I'm gonna
People
watch it now, but
People watch it. It is the funniest comedy segment. Life's Too Short, Liam Nelson. You will laugh.
as soon as we get off, I'm
Yeah,
watching it.
I will send it to you.
Thanks.
How does your life change once that episode gets made?
Um, yeah, everything snowballed from that episode. And so it wasn't even just it getting made, it was that people knew it was getting made is really what opened doors. So South Park is a show that takes a week, from the time you come up with an idea to the time you essentially, see, like it's such a quick
Yeah,
turnaround.
that's crazy. Yeah.
Family, it's insane. Family Guy, it takes 9 months to make an episode and sometimes longer for that episode to air. And so I wrote the episode and then I went back to being an assistant for a hot minute. So that was a hard transition for me. But oh, sorry, did you have a?
No, no, I was just going to say like the up and down. You finally get the show, and
Oh
then
yeah, I thought you were raising your hand like
no, no,
you're in
yeah. I also saw in the yeah. Sorry, yeah. You go on.
Yeah, so that roller coaster was emotionally a little tough because I didn't know if there would be room on staff to bring me on after, or even if there was room, if they would want to hire me. There was a lot of unknowns, so I didn't know what was going to happen with my career after. And I had this huge high of being in a writer's room every day and having all this attention, and then going back to being an assistant. But there was a little bit of press that started surrounding the episode just because it was a monumental episode. Seth's publicist at the time, I think she still is actually, Joy Feely, was extremely kind and had sought out some opportunities for me centered around the episode. I think it was also kind of a big deal that not just like, oh, an assistant's writing an episode, but there have not been historically that many women credited with writing episodes of the show. And so I think, there was some excitement around that. Um, and that's something that's changed, I think, to some degree. But yeah, so that helped, I think, open up some doors, get me some meetings. I was still hip pocketed at WME. And then because of that, um, there was a lot more credibility with my writing career. So if I would walk into a meeting or I would show someone a script, it's like, oh, I have this Family Guy episode that's coming out. Um, made people a lot more eager to read my stuff. And so I ended up getting, and it's actually embarrassing that I don't remember which came first in terms of the offer and when my episode aired.
Yep.
But I got an offer to write, strangely, on a 1 hour drama called Salem, was my next job. I should say next staffing job. I had like little opportunities in between, but I had this opportunity to go write on Salem. And it was just around the time, so I don't remember what happened first, but to have that knowledge, like, oh, I have this episode coming out. I know that you can do this. And Brandon at the time had been working with Seth on Cosmos. They were producing it together, and we were working under the same office space. And so we would all like go out to lunches, like the staffs and everything. Oh, what are you working on? This is what I'm working on. And at some point, I had asked Brandon if he would read my stuff. He had asked as well if I could read it was called Malice at the time, the pilot of Salem, and asked if I had any thoughts on it. I gave him some thoughts. I think he liked some of those thoughts because flash forward 3 years later, which is when my episode was coming out, there's a lot of math.
Yeah.
He had said, oh, like, so congrats on your episode. I don't know, like, what Seth's planning to do with you. Would he be upset if I poached you, essentially? And so I still remember I was in a therapy session when I got a text from Seth saying something about like hearing that Brandon wanted to staff me on Salem. And so that was a whole separate process of leaving Family Guy to go to Salem. But yeah, I'm really grateful for all of that as well. That's another thing of like, yes, you have to capitalize on the luck you've been given, but had Cosmos not been under the same brick and mortar, I would not have met Brandon. We would not have read each other's work. Like a lot of things had to happen for that to line up.
The universe is working for you. That's so crazy. And
Sometimes.
mentally, what I know you said it was tough. Like when you go from writing this episode to going back to the assistant, how did you mentally move forward? Because that could, you've implied it could sting, it could impact your creativity. Where you're like, I'm never gonna, I don't want to put words in your mouth, like what's gonna happen with Family Guy? Like what were you thinking and what kind of helped at that stage?
I think there was a lot of wounded pride, even though no one was intentionally trying to wound me. But I think I just was a worse assistant, to be honest. I fashioned myself a writer at that point. I knew what it felt like, I knew I was capable of it. And I didn't want to do some of the more mundane tasks of being an assistant. So I think I did become maybe a worse assistant. Emotionally, it was difficult, but I think I knew that the best was yet to come. Like I knew that this would open doors. I didn't know what doors. There were a lot of frustrating, almost like the show The Goldbergs. I had gotten pretty far actually in the staffing process, and then I think it was down to two people, and then I felt like they were leaning toward hiring me, and then they ended up hiring neither of us and spending more money on someone above because they always hire from the top down on those shows. But I had a lot of almost before getting the Salem job. I had like a 2 week, I think it was 2 weeks. Seth let me leave to go consult on a show that was, oh gosh, Celebrity Deathmatch, the revamp of Celebrity Deathmatch, which is Eric Fogel's show from back in the day, animated. And I got to go do that for 2 weeks at the Four Seasons in Westlake Village, super fun. So I had all these opportunities that enforced this narrative I was telling myself that I'm not an assistant, I'm a writer. So I think it didn't impact me emotionally the way maybe it could have because I had the faith that I would not go back to being an assistant. Although I did years later, even after I had some writing jobs. But at the time, I had the hubris of, well, I'm a writer now. It's all going to be fine. I just have to kill time until I get my next opportunity. And in the meantime, my actual job probably did suffer a little bit.
And I don't blame you whatsoever, because also the years, the hustle, what you put in, the energy, there's just so much that you put in. And those almost jobs, because in the entertainment industry, one, as you said, you could work on Family Guy, then it gets canceled, and then there's your job. And then, as a
Yeah.
writer, it's not the most stable job as well. But those almost jobs, you may be one of two, as you said, or you're very close to getting a job, which is a huge, that's a huge success in itself. But at the end of the day, depending on one's definition, you're not getting the job. You're like, well, I didn't get it. And so I always found that really interesting because you're probably like excited that you got so close, but then there's the bummer aspect. How did you kind of view that at the time? I know you said you could see these like milestones, but not getting the job, could you see at the time that it was still a huge compliment to you and your abilities, or was it more bummer I didn't get the job?
Definitely more bummer I didn't get it. Yeah, there and if I tell you there were I've had so many of that over the years. I think the most egregious, I was writing on a show called The Jellies with Tyler, the creator, and I got an opportunity to write on another animated show around the time that show was wrapping, and they verbally offered it to me. I was told, "You're getting the job." I've never had this happen any other time, but I've heard such horror stories since with other people, but I was told, like, we're making you the offer. And then after that happened, it turned out there was someone at the network who had a writer that they pushed onto the show. Like, sorry, I know you want this person. We're overriding you. We've got a hire for you. And so they had to then call me and be like, I'm so sorry. Like,
Wow.
you were our choice. I still till this day don't know who the other choice was. It doesn't really matter. But I always took those really, really hard. It definitely, yeah, those sting for sure.
That's brutal. Oh, I've got so many questions on that, but and then just with the stability of the job, you mentioned that you then go back to being a PA after doing a lot of writing. What is kind of
Well,
like that?
and again, this is my pride talking. I never went back to being a PA.
Oh, sorry, you went
I'm kidding. I'm teasing you. I went back to being an assistant. So I ended up years later after having what felt like something that was turning into a fairly prolific writing career. I and this I can dive into more, but it got really, really slow. And at that time, I want to say I was engaged, or we were about to get engaged, and it was hard knowing that my future husband, was bringing in all this income. I didn't want to enter into a marriage in the slowest point of my career, and that was a difficult thing. Why am I? This is the first time that I am talking so much that I forget what I wanted to say.
no, no,
What
no.
was your
I
question?
think it's also really interesting, and we'll dive into it as well. But the
Oh, going
pride.
back to being an assistant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Oh,
Anything.
no, it's okay. I think you had another great
No, no, no.
question.
I
Yeah.
wanted to go back to that because it's a very volatile job, and I hear of so many people where they might be close to a showrunner, then they go back, and then the person scribing. It's so common in this industry, and that it sounds quite terrifying. So I'm just wondering, like mentally, I know we'll transition into the matchmaking as well, but that to me is so mentally. Is like you build yourself up. you have this opportunity, then in your mind, it could appear like, well, one step, what's the expression of, I'm losing my
One step
marbles.
back.
Yeah, but sometimes you can feel like two steps back. You feel like you're going
Yeah.
forward and then you go to a different direction. Just the mental side of that, I always find really interesting. So, what was that like when you ended up going back to the assistant role?
It was really hard. The two men that ended up hiring me, the two show creators, showrunners, made the difficultness. They made it significantly less challenging for me to process because they were so incredibly kind and welcoming. Till this day, like we're friends now.
Oh, nice.
They're coming to my book launch. Yeah, they made it so easy. But before I started the job, and at the beginning and even toward the end, like just the idea that I could be one of those writers in the room, and yet here I was scheduling meetings. It's that was very difficult, knowing I was going to go back into that role. The reason they really helped make it easy, it was Matt Silverstein and Dave Jesser, who are very prolific in the comedy world, and they just made it very easy because working for them, there no ego involved. It's like best
That's
idea
rare.
wins. They don't care. It could be the delivery guy. If he walks in and cracks a joke, it'll make the episode. And so, not that I had never worked with guys like that before, but like really, I hadn't. Um, I felt like there were always good eggs in some of the rooms I was in, but there was also an element of toxicity. And it was the first writer's room that I had witnessed where, I mean, I felt comfortable pitching. They encouraged me to pitch, even though, I think in their mind, when they hired me, there could have been this idea of, they could have been really reluctant to hire me. Like, oh, she's not going to want to they knew my background. She's not going to want to do a good job because she's going to feel some kind of way that she's not a writer. And instead, they looked at it as the advantage that it was. We get an extra brain for the price of an assistant.
Yeah.
And so it was really, really cool. They just treated everyone in the room the same and gave me opportunities to pitch and all of that. And so
Cool.
that really helped soften the blow of the day to day that I needed to do for the actual job.
Amazing. I'm glad that you had a good environment to help support you as well and help build you up in that regard. And then I wasn't clear in the book. I think there, and I could be getting the timeline wrong, so please correct me if I'm wrong. Were you offered to write a Netflix show and you kind of had to make a decision on splitting time between that and matchmaking, or have I got the timeline incorrect?
The timeline, not so much, but the details slightly. So I was never asked to make a choice. I think what
You
I was
just started.
describing,
Yeah.
yeah, I think what it was more that there's only so much time in the day. And so for me, whether it not even just matchmaking versus writing, I feel like any human being, you have to figure out how to juggle your personal life with your work life.
Yep.
There has to be time that you leave for self-care. And then if you're lucky, the ability to care for others. But there's a lot to juggle in life. And then not only was I having to juggle those four categories, I then had divided my work life into two parts, right? So I had um, the writing or assistanting or wherever I was at in my life, but that part of my life in entertainment, and then this matchmaking company that I had founded and really was very actively, I haven't talked about that much yet, but I would go write on a show, or even when I was an assistant, when I went back to when I was working for Matt and Dave, I would meet. And at that point, I had like a 45-minute or to 1 hour commute to work. I was meeting clients in the morning, taking on new clients and doing their intakes, driving to work, staying till dinner time, eating dinner there, and then driving somewhere else to like meet another client and then coming home and wanting to like watch a show with my husband. Like it was busy. So
That's busy.
having to juggle what everyone's normally juggling, but then having like two separate full-time jobs essentially. And so it's definitely a lot. And so I think that's the part of the book you're referring to, maybe when I was working on the Netflix show, and the matchmaking business had really started taking off more. And so it ended up requiring even more of my time.
How exciting is that? And we've alluded, or you were doing that on the side while being a writer and all the other stuff, as we said, extremely time consuming, but also the energy factor. And this seems to be quite evident in your life. Like when you like something, you put the time aside to do it. And I just, there's so many people I know, and I've been guilty of this, where, they work their job and they really want to do something, but they're exhausted afterwards. You didn't even allow the exhaustion, it sounds like, to impact you, because you had such, obviously it would have, but you had such like a joy and passion for the matchmaking that you're doing this while working hectic hours as well. Do you look back at it and be like, I can't believe I did that? Like how exciting that I put in the work, and look how it's been built up now.
I wish I could say I look back and think that I'm still doing it. So I can't even look back. I have to like look at my present. I think I finally have figured out how to juggle it all in a way that I'm okay with.
Yep.
But it does require taking a step back in almost every area at some point, right? So the time that you're describing, I felt like I had put a lot into my relationship. Some of it was subconscious, but I had put a lot of time into my relationship. It led to a very healthy relationship. It led to me getting engaged and being in the marriage I'm in today with our beautiful daughter.
Nice.
So it was a good decision to focus on that, but it did require it. I think it was not a coincidence that it came at a very slow point in my career.
Interesting.
Simultaneously, right, this is the first time that I'm writing a book, on top of developing TV projects and running my matchmaking company. I would be lying if I didn't say I get less quality this past year, less quality time with my husband. So there's always some sort of trade-off happening. But what has, for me, what I've now learned is working is recognizing when you can step back in certain areas, trusting that you put in enough work in those areas that they'll be okay if you're not constantly watering that plant or whatever you want to call it, right? That it will still grow for a week. It might die if you neglect it for a week, but if you're watering the plant a little bit and you come back in a week. So figuring out, okay, like I want to play tennis twice a week, but I might have to skip this week. Or, I want to take my daughter to all four extracurricular activities this week. I might have to show up for two. Or Dave and I are watching Pluribus right now. Like he might have to watch an episode without me so I can make a deadline. But figuring out, okay, recognizing Dave's not saying it, but I could tell we're feeling more distant. I know my work's going to suffer, but I need to trust it's going to be okay. I need to trust I'm going to make that deadline. The most important thing right now is my marriage, and I'm going to spend quality time with him for a few days. I'm going to replenish that well, and then I'll go back to work. And so I think I have finally, and I'm 40, turned 40 this year. It took me about this long to figure out how to do all of that and to recognize the signs. And I would say maybe once or twice a year, I get really overwhelmed with that balance, and I'm not achieving it. And I sort of, I'm actually quite proud of myself. It basically takes like one therapy session. I know exactly what's troubling me.
Yep.
We talk about it. I clear my calendar for a week. No joke. I literally cancel. It doesn't matter what I have. I clear it for a week.
Yep.
I get back in a good headspace and I achieve the balance again. But, once or twice a year, it's like it does become quite unmanageable. But generally speaking, I've figured out a rhythm that adds to my peace and happiness.
Peace and happiness, the two key ingredients in balance. No one even like talks about all of these things. You've done a lot of work there. That's so exciting. And also how exciting, I'm kind of like jumping in and out. You had built
Yeah.
this reputation as well from the matchmaking side while you're working as well. But was it a surprise to you how many people kind of knew about what you were doing on the side when you were first starting out?
Yeah, I mean, there was an element of frustration as well because it's hard. On one hand, I didn't want the worlds to be separated because I was mostly setting up people in entertainment and I was a referral and still am a referral only company. So people had to know what I was doing in order to make the referrals. Yet there I was every time I'd go into a general to meet somebody in the industry, like if my agent made a connection or if I was going to pitch a TV show idea, everyone only wanted to talk about my matchmaking business. And so this was another late realization of maybe I should just, all right, I give up. I'm going to write about matchmaking,
Yep.
is partly why I started doing that. And it was really the best thing that could have happened because, they say write what you know, they say write what you're passionate about. For ages, you could not have told me that. I would have argued that to the death. I would have said, writers have imaginations, like there are plenty of people that like I don't think Game of Thrones, they didn't live that, you didn't live that experience to write
We
Game of
hope
Thrones.
not.
So I would get, yeah, I was like, I'd get offended if someone would say, write what you know. Like you don't trust that I have a vivid enough imagination to write something else authentically. It would really upset me. But so I would go into these meetings and if they were single in particular, but if they maybe their best friend was or their sister was, they would only want to talk matchmaking. And I was like, but I'm here to sell you a TV show that has nothing to do with matchmaking. And so now I embrace it. But yeah, it was definitely, I don't want to use the word balance again, but it was definitely, I wanted them to know about it because I wanted referrals. But on the other hand, I didn't want to talk about it in my work meetings.
Would also probably gave you this reputation as this cool person that can do both, and it's very different because a lot of writers are probably doing nothing outside of just doing that. So it gives you like you're like the what do they call it, like peacocking in a sense, if that's is that the right term? I know you were talking about it in
I
another
think,
podcast.
yeah, I know we use peacocking too. I think now it's cool, right?
Yeah,
Now it's, oh my God, she was so ahead of her time. She had something cool going on that, that wasn't just writing. But back then, and I don't know if it's because the nature of the industry has changed or I've grown in confidence, or both happened simultaneously. But before, it used to be something that I really was very self conscious of. I felt like the fact that they knew that I had this business meant they must know that I am not writing as, getting writing jobs as much as I want because again, you can only do so, there's only so much time in a day. So it felt like I was essentially agreeing to this narrative that I thought they were telling themselves of like, yeah, she must not be a great writer because she's needing to have this other thing, as opposed to, like you said, but I'm so passionate about it and I want to be spending my time doing this. And it can inform my writing. I mean, it's made me a better writer,
oh, that's
meeting
amazing.
so many people all the time. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you get that's how a lot of my writing is. I pick the worst and the best of people I meet, and then exaggerate it as well. But also, just from tying from what we were saying now, and from the very start, no one goes to like Richard Branson and go, "Oh, he's such a failure. He only has like 20 companies that are making $1 billion each." You know what I mean? When you get into that space, it's all about doing as much as possible. But anyway, the way that you officially put pen to paper is like hilarious to me, where someone goes, do you have a matchmaking company? And you're like, yes, of course. Can you tell me a bit about that, of what actually made you turn it into a company?
Yeah, because definitely for a while it was not official at all. And I think I was charging like $10 a month for people to just basically to collect people, to have people to set up. Um, when did I turn it into an official LLC? I think before I was referral only. And this all, by the way, was when I was Seth's assistant, although he had no idea. He knows now, obviously, but had no idea at the time that that's what I was doing during the, if I tell you, very limited free time working for him,
Yeah.
but set that up at the same time. I had spread word that I was doing it, $10 a month. But at the same time, I did not have a database to set people up from, right? I had just told people I'm doing this. And part of it was I had set people up in school, like not in an official capacity, but I was always the friend that would walk up to guys at a bar and say, what about my friend over there? So
At the
it
talent at
was,
a young age.
yeah, exactly. And so it was something that I was always drawn to in some capacity of helping others find joy in that part of their lives. And so I just told people, "Hey, I'm doing this." I'd always thought about it and never really like pulled that trigger. I finally did, after years of being a Family Guy, and just as kind of as a social experiment. There was one writer, or not what writer, one producer in particular on the show who I just could not wrap my head around why she was single, and just made it my mission. I'm like, I'm going to find her husband. But I realized can't find her husband if I'm just reliant on the few referrals I'm getting from the people that I'm telling. I wanted to recruit, and that's how most companies in my field, that's how they operate. They have a limited database and then they recruit to fill in the gaps. And so I was recruiting. I started an LLC because at some point I realized, well, this is not a good business idea. This is not even a good life choice. If God forbid I set someone up with someone I don't really know who, like there was one guy, I think, what did he do for work? I don't remember. I met him like randomly purchasing something and he was like a cute guy at a store. And I was like, you'd be great in my database. But then I realized like, what if, I set someone like that up and something untoward happens? I don't know if you saw the film Materialist.
No, but I know.
Okay, so I guess I'm slightly spoiling it. There is something similar to the hypothetical I'm sharing that takes place in the film as one of the main storylines, but that was a fear of mine, and I was literally having trouble sleeping. I wanted to help people, and I thought, like, what if God forbid I end up hurting them instead? And so, at the very least, I wanted to form an LLC to protect myself. Now, with that said, obviously, the main goal was to protect others, but it really like opened up this thought process of, oh, actually, I'm really opening myself up liability wise by sending people on dates. I didn't have the umbrella of a business, an official business,
Yep.
and so that was my first way to address that fear. I've since become referral only because I am Jewish and paranoid. And so, I'm just like, that's how I sleep at night. Kudos to other companies that have found other ways to go about it. But just for me personally, I feel much better making it a referral only company. But that's why I started the LLC initially.
Can I also add to that? I know you made the jokes before, but also because of your hands-on approach, also high integrity, by the way, even just hearing about like competitors and what they do, there's no one like you. I don't even know how to like bring this all up. Just by you knowing the person, or at least knowing of the person videoing, it means you can also give probably better advice in terms of how they operate and how they date, and you feel more comfortable when you're more invested. Then there's more potential for the magic to happen as well. And I think that works directly with your hands-on approach. Does that make sense? Like you know the person, you've got an idea of them. It's not just some random person. I think that's way better than just as you said, potentially competitors might just have a database full of people and they actually don't actually know who the person is. I know you also do the coaching as well, and that we'll
Yeah, I
get
want
into
it
that
to
as
feel
well.
like friends setting up friends, even though in many cases it's like 7, 8 steps removed. I've been doing it long enough that you get referrals of referrals of referrals, et cetera. And so, but it's still the feel of the company is like friends setting up friends because there's a degree of accountability there that you just don't have on a dating app. And yeah, I love personally getting to know every single person, not just my clients, but those I'm matching them with. I treat them the same.
Oh, that's awesome. And this is also one of the many like quotes that I have. And I love this. This speaks to you and how much joy you get from what you do. I think you said a happy couple brought 10 times more joy than writing episode 250. And episode 250 of Family Guy, that's an amazing achievement. You lit up when you were talking about it, but 10 times more. Isn't that awesome that you found a thing where it just, you feel great. And then imagine the people that you set up, how great they even feel.
I'm grinning, not even because of your question, but I think this is the first time I've ever heard words in my book said to me. No one's, I've done like a few interviews for the book so far. I have not, no one has quoted me to me. And that gave me like some joy just hearing
Well,
that.
congratulations.
I half heard the question and I was half like, oh, he's quoting my book.
No, it's more like when you find your thing and knowing that the inspirational aspect of like the joy that it brings
Yeah.
you because of the hard work that you've done, but then also seeing the other couple, imagine how happy they are. So it's more just about
Yeah.
like yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely, in terms of what I was saying before, or your great question about when did that shift happen in your life to go from one to the other, I think that was a contributing factor as well, having that first success story and being like, wait a minute, this is a different feeling, a different feeling of joy that I was part of contributing and having that realization too, that I could feel that way, and maybe then some, right? Compared to the joy that I thought was like the most joy you could possibly feel in your career. I'm like, wait, but this is hitting differently. This is impacting lives in a very direct way And I have to tell you, having worked on Family Guy and having worked for Seth directly, and even seeing him just with, and he did this many, many times while I was working for him, but with one kid for one day who was like from the Make a Wish Foundation, right? There's no denying that comedy brings a lot of people a lot of joy. So when I say that it brings me more joy setting people up, I don't want to take away from anyone else where that is their primary way of feeling that joy. But just for me, the personal fulfillment that I felt, what it just hit harder, knowing that I brought two people together, hopefully forever.
And what I was alluding to, it's so inspiring when you hear someone, you've also found your thing with writing and all of that as well, and it brings you fulfillment. But when you hear someone talk about like ultimate fulfillment, it's contagious. It's beautiful to hear. And I know when you're starting out a business, there are a lot of challenges, and we might have to do like a part 10 on this one day in the future. But there's courage to put yourself out there. There's courage to get kind of sales in a sense, like you mentioned, approaching people. What are some of like the early hardships that you had to face when starting out doing the business?
Oh boy, so many. Oh, with the business specifically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We'll
I
leave it
mean,
there.
the biggest one at the beginning was, or at least the first one that comes to mind, was that I was getting great women and the guys were wonderful. So I don't want to say that they were lower in quality, but they were not the kind of men that the women I was working with wanted to meet.
Yeah.
I think even just charging at all was just somehow attracting men. Because again, matchmaking back then was even less common than it is now. And it's been around for centuries. But now it's like, oh, I have a matchmaking. There's a big difference between 15 years ago when no one wanted to say they met through me, through to like a few flash forward to recently. I was like walking around CAA with a client of mine, and she was like, everyone come meet my matchmaker. There's a big difference.
Yep.
And so back then, especially, nobody wanted to tell anyone that they were working with a matchmaker. Women, at least, and I'm gender stereotyping just to make a point, women at the time felt like, okay, we know it's hard out there. We love that you're trying this new approach. You're so reasonable. Here's my $10. Show me what you got. Good looking, successful, grounded, funny, charismatic, like could work a room type of guys. They were like, I'm not giving you $10. I can do it myself.
There'd be a
you
bit
know?
of like
So
pride and all of that.
yeah, so the biggest challenge for me at the beginning was finding the kind of guys that the women I was working with wanted to meet. It was easier the other way around. I had tons of the kinds of women that the men I was working with wanted, but not the other way around. And this is a big challenge. I would say most matchmakers face at some point, regardless, like irrespective of business model.
Yep.
So that was a hurdle. It took me, I think, because my business model is so different and my approach is so different, it took me like a decade to build up a massive quality database from every demographic. But yeah, a lot of the challenges. Oh, another big challenge toward the beginning, especially, was meeting someone amazing, and male or female, and realizing I didn't have a match for them. And even if I were to recruit, it could be challenging. And I would take everybody's money, even though I want to hammer home, like I was so reasonable. I wasn't like taking $10,000 from people and like not doing anything with that money. But there would be people that would give me like, even when I started increasing my rates, like $100, $150, years ago. And I didn't have anyone to set them up with. And it wasn't lack of desire. I would fall in love with these people platonically and I couldn't wait to match them. But I realized I didn't have anyone. And so that was a big struggle, figuring out how to address that. How do I help them, and not make them feel even more insecure or more rejected than they already feel out on their own because they're coming to me for help? So do I take their money and then the matches aren't, do I knowingly set them up with people I know they're going to like, but it's not going to be reciprocated? I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. I'm always looking for mutual matches.
Yeah.
Do I take their money and set them up with people they might not like, but it's people that would like them back? Maybe. Or do I waitlist them? Or, until I have enough people to potentially match them with and let them know I have a wait list, which let's face it, it could just come off as I'm exclusive, right? So it wouldn't be hurtful. Or do I get into date coaching, which is something that I did years later. I didn't do when I started having this problem. So the date coaching was not an immediate reaction to this problem, but it is something that helps solve it. And now when someone comes to me, if I can't activate them off my waitlist right away, at least I can say, but I'd love to coach you. I'd love to help you find other ways to meet someone on your own. So those are two. I'm sure there were so many hiccups at the beginning. That could be the entire podcast.
And I love that you learn from them as well. And I think this is also really crucial because you hadn't considered coaching. Then you meet, what's her name, Patty, what's her name,
Oh,
Stang?
Patty Stanger.
And that changes your life as well, where she gives you advice, which is also rare for her to give advice when inverted commas a competitor. And she gives you,
I know, right? When she gave me advice, it it did change the course of my life, but not in the moment because at the time she gave it to me, I it it didn't make sense. I was like, why would I get into date coaching? It didn't add up in my mind. It felt like, who am I to tell other people how to date differently? It was early enough in my business that it just didn't feel like I could pull it off authentically. There was imposter syndrome happening, all the usual things when someone tells you to do something that you're not sure that you're good at. And so I felt like, cool, that's great that you think I should get into date coaching and that you've done that as well. But I don't think it's the right choice for me because if I'm a client, I don't think they should trust me with this. What do I know? Um, I wasn't even that far out, like I had toxic relationships. Like, who am I to tell people, right? And so it did take a while. It took me getting into a really healthy relationship. It took me having thousands of clients going on dates and hearing what was working and not working. At some point, I actually became an expert without realizing it,
yeah,
on dating. But for that realization to kick in, there was a decent amount of time before that conversation with Patty and me deciding to actually branch off into date coaching. Now I'm more passionate about date coaching than I am matchmaking because with matchmaking, especially the way I operate, where it's referral only, I either know your future partner or I don't, right? Let's be realistic. Statistically, what are the chances? And so I will try my hardest and truly, like, no one will go to bat for you more than me. But either I'm going to do it or I'm not, despite my best efforts. And so lots of success stories, even more failures. And any matchmaker that says otherwise, like, I'd love for you to check their bank statements or what have you.
yeah,
It's just impossible, right? No matter how good you are. And so when it comes to date coaching, we could talk for 30 minutes and I'm not going to say I'll change your life, but maybe, I know that I'm going to, in 30 minutes, have an impact on how you show up in the world in your romantic life. And I know it's going to be for the better. And so that's something I can charge whatever for because I know that I can deliver. There are guarantees I can make. I'd love to talk to any client that felt like they didn't get anything out of our conversations. And so that I like to say I have a 100% success rate in terms of, if you find a good therapist and you come out feeling better about yourself after every session, or you feel armed to tackle the world, in a way that you didn't prior.
amazing. And good on you for working through. I know she planted the seed, but working through that imposter syndrome, all the voices that you potentially had. I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. And now the joy that you've gotten and the inspiration you've helped with many other people. And, even as you said, even if you don't necessarily set them up with someone, they're probably leaving a lot better than when they first started. You're giving them different life experience, different perspective. So crucial. Congratulations to you.
Yeah. Thank you. Honestly, to like close the loop, because I know we're approaching the 90 minutes and such. To close that loop, when I became a mom and how I said that unlocked something in me in terms of the confidence. Yeah, hopefully this doesn't cause people to imagine me not wearing clothes, but this is truly, I think, a good metaphor. When I became a mom, I went from having, I don't want to say body image issues because it was never like a deep struggle, but I went from not loving changing in front of a partner to like, here's my body, it's amazing, it does all these cool things, right?
Nice.
And it took just that recognition of what I was capable of for that to be like a non-issue and for me to have even more confidence in that arena. I think the same thing, and maybe tell me if this is too much of a stretch, but my brain is connecting the dots with anything in life, career wise, whatever. I realize people will believe anything you tell them. If you tell them, and I don't mean tell them, more show them.
Yeah.
But especially with social media, but just in general, if you exude a certain vibe, a certain uh, energy, a certain level of success, if you project the way that you want to show up in the world and you believe that you are showing up in that way, it is very easy to convince others. My body was the same body. Yes, there were changes before and after having my daughter. If anything, objectively, my body was better before, right? But I felt more confident after because I stopped caring what other people thought. And I had the belief in myself that I could execute. I don't know where this is going in terms
I
of my
love this.
body with
No, the
execution. But when it comes to work, right, I realized I don't need to be afraid of whether or not people think I could do the job. I don't need to be afraid that I have nothing to say. I know that I have a lot to say. I know there's going to be people who want to hear it. And I know that if I get hired for a job, I will deliver. And just that knowledge and me realizing like it doesn't matter who hires me, whether it's a client or whether it's a future employer for a writer's room, I know that I would crush it. I would help them, I would elevate the show, and having that belief in myself, nothing else matters. And that is what gives you confidence. It's not getting the job, it's not finding a husband for your client, it's not feeling like you could take your clothes off in front of your partner. Like it's it's just belief in yourself and the rest just follows. And I feel like this is a very like mumble jumble way to
No,
say it all,
brilliant.
but
You'll get a TED talk. That was great. That is so beautiful. I love the journey and the confidence instilled within yourself. And I just want to, I've just written down a few points and I had it in my notes from before. Because you actually build a connection with your clients, which also seems rare, where sometimes people can just be like, do this, do that, and there's no real human connection. And, we established at the start, you've been invited to weddings and you actually, build relationships with, some of your clients. What's it like in those moments? Like, there's a good example, and people need to, I've already forgotten his name, Kent, for example. You built a great relationship with the guy, and I know it ends up coming like full circle, where you build this connection, you really are invested, you want him to do well, and then they leave and you kind of feel like ghosted in the moment. How do you deal with that? Because you're invested. You love him in a sense, not like your husband, but there's like a love if you want them to succeed. And then for whatever reasons, people, it could be money, it could be insecurity, it can be, I don't want to do this anymore. Often it's probably the person. What's it like when they ghost and potentially don't come back?
I cannot tell you how hard I still take it. I am constantly trying to work on this. I don't know if it's both a weakness and a strength in a way, the fact that I care this much about the people that hire me, but as I said, you can't have success with everyone in this field. And when there is a failure, there is an instinct sometimes for that person to, they need somewhere to lash out. If you're frustrated that you're single, you're lonely, and sometimes I'm in front of them, you know? And so it can happen sometimes where they're experiencing frustration in their dating life and it's not even necessarily because I gave them a bad match. That could be the final straw, but it could be that they went on three horrible hinge dates that made them feel worse about themselves. And then they go on one neutral match with me through me. But that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And they just take a dating break or they say, like, thanks for trying, but I'm done. Doesn't happen often. But when it does, I take it really hard. And my business partner is better about separating, about recognizing like they've hired us. If they don't want to keep using us, then that's on them. I try to come at it from a place of empathy and realize like it's not something that I've done, 99.9% of the time. It's not because I've done something offensive. It's recognizing that like it happened once this last quarter where we were working with like like a Gen Zer who is just, unhappy with where she's at in her dating life.
It's
And
more than just, it could be like a whole life thing that,
yeah, she had
gets
said something
projected.
in the email about like letting the universe, she's had a good experience matchmaking, like thanks for our time, essentially, like nothing to indicate that she's had a bad experience, but she wants to let the universe decide. And I looked at her profile and I realized she had a month left on her membership. And I don't know if this has anything to do with like approaching the new year, wanting to approach dating differently, but she wanted the universe to decide. And I took that personally. And I wrote the longest email back and try and explain all that we've done for her and how invested I am. And doesn't she realize, this is hurtful to me because I so badly wanted to get it right for her and be part of her journey. And I felt I was being robbed of that experience. But needing to take a breather and be like, hold on, she's the one really hurting here. Why is she hurting? I'm not even necessarily the cause, being chosen or not being chosen because someone else is picking the universe,
Yeah.
that shouldn't be offensive to me. Um, but I took that so hard, I thought I had a month left to try to get it right for her. And I had like literally had another date lined up in my mind for her. So that was hard. And I've had a handful of those experiences in the last 15 years. And I don't know that I will ever stop, like not take that personally. But it does happen, and you're referring to a time that happens in the book with one of my clients, and I talk about how I processed it, and it was hard, and it still is.
I don't want to ruin the rest of the story, but it works out. And then just last thing on that, because you're coming with, such integrity is the word that springs to mind. You have to meet people where they're at, and people can be stubborn. They can be like, you're wrong. And I'm sure you've had all types of people. Then also, I'm double loading this. One of the lessons that you've shared is that just because someone wants love doesn't mean they've done the work necessarily to achieve it. So I would feel like you're there, you really want them to live their best life. And then there's like ego, stubbornness, don't want to hear it, or they're not willing to put in the work. How frustrating is that? Or do you see it's more like a challenge or a bit of both?
Yeah, it depends how they respond when it's pointed out to them. And I have to be very careful about bringing that to someone's attention. I would say half the time they're eager to grow and in fact excited because they've been hitting a wall on their own and they don't know why, and I'm able to give them an explanation. So sometimes it's met with a lot of gratitude and excitement. Then I have, some people that don't want to hear it. They don't want to change. They, even if they're self-sabotaging, they don't want to point it out to them and they want to keep doing the same thing over and over again, and they're expecting different results and they're just not going to get it. I hope that they get it. But I've had to learn in those situations that if someone doesn't want the help, that's on them. I might not be able to continue setting them up because there's only so many times I can have somebody do the same thing over and over and the other person sitting across from them, be dissatisfied with the time spent. But, depending upon what that reason is, at some point I might have to, um, not match someone anymore. But generally speaking, I find that people are part of what they like about matchmaking is we get to hear how both sides are interpreting the same date. I set a client up last night.
Okay.
She had gotten, I mean, every night there's like, but just to tell a story about the one last night, um, it wasn't a match, but they both had a great time in terms of like, both were like, it's getting closer. So it's like, that's fine. I'll take it. I'll nail it the next time. But it was a straight couple. In the woman's case, she had said something about she sent like actually really helpful feedback about what could have been different that maybe might have changed the experience. One little detail had something to do with the behavior of his, a body language thing, not involving touching her, but something she mentioned out of like a slew of things. And in his feedback, he thought that what he did was positive, right? So, and I know this client well enough to know that what he did, he will learn from the experience. So I don't want to give away, I don't want to breach confidentiality if they listen to this episode. I don't want because it was a specific behavior, but an example might be like, oh, like they were walking away from the table and he like touched the bottom of her back, but it was something that didn't even involve physical touch, but something very innocuous. And it had to do with like how the person was either like leaning in or sitting or what it was something with like how they were carrying themselves. That was a turnoff for her. And in his feedback form, he referred to it, but more as like, oh, I did this. And I'll get, I know he's someone eager for feedback and I'll be able to sit down with him and say like this thing, rubbed her the wrong way. Or you've done this a couple times. I usually will wait till there's a pattern.
And also, like it sounds, sorry for interjecting, it also
Right.
given your personality and how you interact with your clients, it sounds like you're able to know when the right time is. You intuitively can pick up that, some people are more open than not. Like you're approaching it in a lovely way. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, so he's someone I know would be receptive, but I have found polite ways to test the waters. And as soon as I get that someone's not receptive, I don't try to push. I really will, I'll just try again to set them up. And if the same thing's happening a few times, I might stop setting them up if they, and this is for the ones that, are in the database, not my clients, it's a little different. But every once in a while, someone like that might reach out to me. Maybe it's been 6 months since I matched them and they want to know if I have someone. At that point, I view it as an opening. Like, okay, so you want to be matched by me. There is like a very minor thing that if I match you again, I would love for you to be receptive to doing differently. Are you open to a quick conversation? Maybe it's that they talked about their girlfriend every single time I matched them and it made them sound emotionally unavailable. I need to know, like, okay, look, like, yeah, Brad, I'll set you up again. I've got someone great for you, but you have to promise me, this has been a recurring thing. It won't be traced back to one person. So I'm not betraying anyone's confidence, but talking about her a lot. Like it's really not giving off the right impression that you're trying to convey. So that's just an example,
Yeah.
but I'll step in maybe at that point because I feel like they've given an opening.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really do have to, read the room.
We'll do a part 2 on red flags and what people can do. And how do people contact you for both the coaching and the matchmaking?
Yeah, for sure. So the website for my company, which they can contact me for either matchmaking or coaching, although matchmaking, it's a little bit different because I match locally in Los Angeles. Everybody's referred, but you can get in touch with me through my website, which is www.lj. So for my business partner, Lauren, I'm Jaydi, LJMatchmaking.com. And then my handle on most social media platforms is at Matchmade in Hollywood. And then you may have said it in the intro, but the book that's coming out end of January that I'm so excited about for everyone to read. Honestly, like, yes, do I want to work with you one-on-one for coaching? Of course. And is that going to be super productive and rewarding? Like, I know it would be. But also for much cheaper, you can get my book. And truly, it should, if I did my job correctly, it should feel like we just had 10 one-on-one coaching sessions together. So all that for the price of a hard copy of the book. That's called Your Last First Date, Secrets from a Hollywood Matchmaker.
And it's a great read. I recommend it. That's also going to be in the episode notes. People check it out. Sorry, when did you say it's going to be out? Because I'm going to get it out within that time frame.
Oh, awesome. Thanks. January 27th.
Amazing. Okay, cool. I love your story. I love your learnings. You're very uplifting, and I love your personal human approach. I've said it many times. You've got a lot of integrity, which is quite rare, especially in different types of entertainment, let alone matchmaking and all of that stuff. And yeah, this was an absolute joy. And yeah, thank you so much.
I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you for your time. You asked really wonderful questions.
I love how Jaydi talks about the perceived lack of success when you do multiple things. If you love something and have passion for it, you don't need to be defined by just one path. We are all multifaceted beings with many talents, passions, and interests. Jaydi initially believed that having more than one career path meant that she wasn't excelling at either. However, with time, dedication, and self-belief, she realized she could be great at both, and that it was nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed of. From Jaydi, we can learn that we're not defined by the one thing, and success isn't about narrowing who we are, but about fully embracing all the parts of ourselves that want to be expressed. So I'll leave you with this epic quote. To know many things is to be wise. Greek proverb. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy and life.